Welcome back. In a ramp-up of his immigration crackdown, President Trump has ordered federal officials to expand efforts to detain and deport undocumented migrants in Democratic-run cities. In a social media post yesterday, Trump called on ICE agents to, quote, do all in their power to achieve the very important goal of delivering the single largest mass deportation program in history. The directive builds on a White House order from April that calls on officials to document sanctuary cities that are not complying with its agenda, threatening those that fail to do so may lose federal funding. It also comes amid continued protests in Los Angeles and other major cities against the administration's immigration policies. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Joe Morelle of New York. He's the ranking member of the Committee on House Administration. And I want to get to your work on that committee because it's especially important in light of what we've seen in Minnesota. But first, let's start on immigration. Your reaction to President Trump ordering federal officials to expand efforts against undocumented migrants in so-called Democratic-run cities, the fact that he's targeting folks there as opposed to anywhere else in the country. What's the message that sends?
Well, look, we should remember that tens of thousands of these folks are here in the United States legally. They are documented, even though the president uses the word undocumented or worse, illegal. They were here legally. And the president has changed the rules after people got here for tens of thousands of Venezuelans, for other people who were here legally. And secondly, a number of people were here and documented, and the United States was considering asylum for them. So he's changed the rules. It'd be like it when my great-grandparents came here legally, and then a few years later were told, you're no longer welcome, and we started deporting people. It's so bad that even the Trump administration cabinet members had to persuade the president not to continue some of these deportations. And frankly, remember how they were first described, people who are here awaiting consideration of their asylum pleas. They were described as being lazy and that we were all paying for them to be here. It turns out they're now going to workplaces where they're gainfully employed. So, look, there's a lot going on here. I don't, by any means, think that protests should turn violent in any way, but this is completely un-American and contrary to everything that we have told these individuals when they came to the United States.
Well, and there is a clear difference between the way that the Trump administration says they were elected to go after violent illegal immigrants and then, of course, those who are just trying to make a living here and be on a path to set themselves up here in this country. I think this is something we're going to continue following. But at the same time, we've seen you posting, as well as others on social media, about the horrific shootings in Minnesota this weekend of state lawmakers there. You play an interesting role here because you're not just a Democratic member responding to this, but then you're also the head on the Democratic side of the House Admin Committee that deals with security at the U.S. Capitol. Has the posture changed? I know that the House is out this week, but should lawmakers expect a stepped-up presence? Do you think that lawmakers need more security, whether it's private or Capitol Police or some kind of mix of both?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank law enforcement who worked so hard over the weekend in Minnesota and around the country to make sure that the suspect was apprehended. We're grateful for their hard work. Secondly, our prayers are with not only Senator Hoffman and his wife Yvette, who have come out of surgery, but also certainly our prayers and thoughts are with State Representative Portman and her husband, Mark, who were tragically killed. Yeah, I think there is growing concern. I think Leader Jeffries and I have continued to work on this. I have continued to ask for additional security going far back as when there was the violence in Butler, Pennsylvania a year ago. So I think members continue to be concerned, and incidents like this do nothing but add fuel to the concern that people are under threat who are elected officials at all levels of government. Certainly, we're concerned about members of Congress being targeted. So I think there needs to be more security and more concern paid to this, or we'll chase people away from participating in this process who will say, not only for their personal safety, but for their family's safety, that they simply aren't going to run for office or participate in public life. And that would be, I think, tragic indeed.
Have you seen more of your colleagues requesting or putting in their own budgets personal security because of this increased threat number? I mean, Capitol Police tracks this stuff. What are the conversations you have with your colleagues and with Capitol Police?
Yeah, I think very much people are concerned. And again, more for their families typically than they are for themselves. Look, they're not going to be intimidated. They're going to continue to do their jobs. That's a recurring theme that I heard speaking to members all through the weekend, that they're going to continue to do the work that they have to do on behalf of their community and on behalf of the American people. But I would be less than candid if I said that people aren't alarmed at what happened. Certainly having a manifesto with elected officials targeted on the lists and carrying out essentially executions is something that would trouble anyone. So people are concerned, but again, they're not going to be intimidated. They're going to do their jobs, and we're going to continue to work on trying to create a safer environment for all these folks.
Yeah, that's a really important task, one that needs to be bipartisan in nature. For now, we'll leave it there. Democratic Congressman Joe Morelle of New York, thank you for coming on with us, as always.
Thank you, Allie.